Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Aller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, everybody. This is Bill Rabinowitz, along with Angelique Chengelis. This is the highlight of my morning. highlight of my year. It is the highlight. Angelique is the Queen of Ann Arbor. It's an annual tradition that for the Ohio State Michigan game, I have her as my podcast guest. We are close friends. I grew up in Dayton. Angelique grew up in Cincinnati. And at rival high schools, no less. I always joke that Angelique booed me, probably threw things at me when I was a very bad basketball player.
Don't boo you, no.
And she likes to point out that I am older than she is.
As much.
Welcome, Angelique.
Thanks, Bill. It's good to be here.
It is.
It's my favorite week of the year.
It is a great week, right? Even for a game that's a little different. I'll just start with the obvious question. Did you expect this kind of regression from Michigan this year?
Yeah, I seem to be the only one, I think, coming into this season. There was one guy did a survey of all the people who cover Michigan, and everybody was like 11-1, 10-2, and I'm like, are they not looking at the same team I am? And I had ceiling 8-4. I was saying more 7-5, and I think that was definitely more attainable. I mean, when you look, they should have won at Illinois. They had those two long drives. Red zone came away with nothing. They should have won at Washington. So I feel like I was closer to what it should have been this year versus what it is currently, which is, barely bowl eligible and going into Columbus's 3-touchdown underdogs. But Bill, I thought it was pretty obvious. New coach, entirely new defensive staff, new strength coach, new special teams coach, no quarterback. No receivers. And I just thought it was kind of obvious that this is where this was going to be.
Did Michigan fans expect this kind of regression?
No, I don't think so. I think you know how fan bases are. You've covered teams that are coming off of national championships, and I think, maybe that's unfair. Ohio State did reload, but regardless, there's always that euphoria and just, I wouldn't call it denial, but I think that they are just living off of that national championship run and the last 3 seasons, 40-3, and you get to that point, you think it can't decline. It's certainly not like this fast. So I think definitely a surprise to Michigan fans.
What's it been like with Sean Moore as the coach instead of Jim Harbaugh?
Not as interesting, and I don't mean that as an insult to Sharon. It's just that every time Jim Harbaugh would open his mouth, it was something that needed a headline probably. And Sharon is he's learning on the job. He hasn't been a head coach, so he's much more cautious. He doesn't talk big picture things like Jim would. Certainly not nearly as quirky. I wouldn't say quirky at all. Definitely not weird. And but just different, a little boring, I think. And again, not an insult to Sharon, but just because the last 9 years of covering Harbaugh was just like intense, and you're always on your toes because what's the guy going to say next? What's he going to do? And now with Sharon, I just think it's more of he is learning on the job, and head coaches have to make.
There's J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum. Go down the list. Mike Sanderstill. Is there a player you think that they miss maybe more than any other? I guess McCarthy's the obvious one because they don't have a quarterback, but maybe beyond even McCarthy, is there a player that's gone that they just haven't been able to replace or just they missed so much?
Yeah, I think it's Sanderstill, and I thought that last year. I thought he was the glue, and I think he was a guy who's definitely a leader on defense, but he really was respected across the board, offense, defense, special teams, and he had just the way he carried himself was different as a leader, and I think this group, the captains this year, they're very good, they're very good guys, but no one has stood out in that sense, and I say that, but I also have to say that this team, what has surprised me with guys who are definitely, first round projected NFL picks, that these guys haven't quit. Colston Loveland was the one after the Illinois game saying, okay, yeah, there's no playoff, but no one's quitting. And, you see Kenneth Grant out there. You see Mason Graham still out there playing. So they have managed to keep everyone together despite this fall. And but I do think Mikey Sainristil was critical. I mean, Blake Corum for sure, but there was just something about the way Mikey carried himself and led this team that I think has definitely been missed.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the players they still do have. Let's just start with the defensive line, I guess, with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Just how good are they? I mean, they're projected to be high first-round picks. I mean, how dominating have they been?
I think they've been really dominant, and especially Mason Graham, and he's a finalist for the Outland, I think, right? I posted it yesterday, now I can't remember, and voted. But I think you don't notice the numbers all the time, but I think he's so athletic, he's so gifted. I was asking his position coach the other day about how he would campaign for him for these awards, and he just said his football IQ is second to none. And I think his wrestling background really, really helped become the player that he is. And Kenneth Grant, too. I mean, I think he's been less impressive than Mason, but still really good. And that guy's just so athletic. And they've been complimented on the edge. I think Josiah Stewart's having a heck of a year. And a guy who transferred in before last season and stuck around because he wanted to get better. And guy who's maybe a little undersized, but plays big, as the cliche goes. I mean, he leads the team with 8.5 sacks. So it's a very complimentary group there. The difference from this group to last year is the depth, and it's coming, but it's just not like last year when they could rotate and stay fresh. And Graham and Kenneth Grant have definitely played a ton more snaps, and I think that they expected it. And they've definitely performed well with the added work.
And then on offense, obviously Loveland and probably Mullings, right? Mullings, the running back, along with Donovan Edwards. But those are probably the three names, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that was the other thing coming into the season. It was just like, who's there? I mean, besides those three that you mentioned, and that's been showing. I think a guy who has definitely had sneaky good performances the last couple weeks, and I think that's also because Davis Warren is getting a little more settled in at quarterback, is Tyler Morris. And I have a feeling he's a guy who'll show up on Saturday as someone they'll need. I mean, I don't know what the status is of Colson Loveland yet. He left after the touchdown first half last week and didn't come back to the field in the second half. Sharon Moore says his trajectory is positive, but if he's not full go, or if he can't play, I think you got to look at a guy like Tyler Morris, who is definitely, I think, becoming one of. I mean, he was one of JJ's targets, a guy he played in high school with, and definitely someone Davis Ford feels comfortable with. But yeah, I mean, it was an offense that I'm still not sure why they didn't supplement with guys from the portal.
Yeah,
and they brought in a guard, and that's they didn't. They brought Amorian Walker back, and he hasn't done anything. So,
how did Michigan get caught without a bona fide quarterback?
People keep debating that, Bill, and it was like, they were preparing. They wanted to win a national championship. They were so focused on that, and it was Jim didn't know where he was going. I mean, I don't care if Jim Harbaugh was coming back or not coming back. I mean, I'm not sure how you don't have someone assigned to looking at the portal, examining what the quarterbacks are there, because regardless, if Harbaugh came back, they needed another quarterback. Because people are like, if Harbaugh came back, JJ was coming back. I don't think so. I think Harbaugh would have advised him to move on, and so I think that was a little bit of coaching, recruiting malpractice. I don't know what you want to call it, but even in the spring, talking to Kirk Campbell, their offensive coordinator, he was like, this is going to be an explosive offense, and well, don't you need to go to the portal and get a quarterback or receivers? No, feel good about what they have. And I know I told you at media days I thought Jack Tuttle would be the starter because he'd had the experience at Indiana, some starting experience, but he just never got fully healthy. So, again, they're just like starting from scratch in a sense. And I thought they panicked early. I thought pulling Davis Warren, even though he had 6 interceptions, I couldn't figure out why they weren't keep him in, but use Alex Orji more in those packages, not just one play, but use him. And, I don't know. I just think if they stuck with Davis Warren and given him a chance to get comfortable, that they might have had some more success.
Well, they've been awful all year, and then last week they scored 50 against Northwestern, which probably got Ohio State's attention. Did things just click? I mean, Northwestern played Ohio State relatively tough. Maybe there was the Ohio State effect where you play Ohio State and it takes a toll, and the next week you pay the price. I don't know. What's your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Michigan was coming off of a bye, or as they call it, a bye-in week, and then they really did kind of hunker down and focus. And I think Northwestern in the second half just looked like it was not. It was sort of a shell of itself from the first half. So I think there was a little bit of Northwestern maybe lost interest. But I do think part of it is Davis Warren. He's now has 7 starts, and that was his 4th, and he's getting comfortable. The guy has a good arm. I mean, it's the thing we haven't talked about, Bill, is the offensive line, and that was another big reason why I thought this was not going to be a great offense, because 2021 and 22 they had those Joe Moore award-winning lines. They were very good. Last year's line was a drop-off, and they were semifinalists, and of course they went on to win a national championship. But they had guys like Blake Corum running the ball, and they just had more pieces that could work behind a good offensive line, not a great one. And then I looked at this line, and these were the backups to those guys, and I just thought, well, there's nobody who's really ever stood out. So I think that's a big part of it is Davis Warren is sort of figuring out how to play behind this line, and I thought the offensive line did play better last week, and it'll be a different story on Saturday, of course, but I thought they did take a few steps forward.
And it doesn't help that the receivers are pretty ordinary, right?
Yeah,
wide receivers.
Yeah. I mean, Samaj Morgan, I thought he was going to have a bigger season. He hasn't, and it's also, I still say, the players have said consistently execution. And my point is, at some point, the coaches are responsible for getting these guys to execute, and are they putting them in the right situations? I mean, you really haven't been able to see, with the exception of Colston, receivers getting separation very consistently, and I think that's partly coaching. And they just don't. I do think Tyler Morris, as I've mentioned, and a couple other guys. O'Leary has his moments, but they just don't have that big receiver threat, and that's definitely been lacking.
The one stat that I noticed, it's just striking. The longest pass play this year is 36 yards.
Yeah, to a tight end.
That's just amazing to me. What's the longest by a wide receiver? I could actually probably just call that up.
31. It was a touchdown to Samaj Morgan against Texas. A late score.
Yeah, when it didn't even matter, right? I mean, it was the game.
Yeah. Yeah, the two longs are did tight ends, and then Samaj had the 31-yarder against Texas late. I mean, they're the only team, I think, in the country that doesn't have a pass of 40 yards or more completion. So, I mean, again, I think that goes to just this weird quarterback carousel. I mean, Davis Warren starts 3 games. Alex Orji, who's not a thrower, he starts the next 3, and those were not coincidentally the games where Chloe Mullings, his rushing yard totals were definitely higher in those games. And then you bring Jack Tuttle in for a game, and then now you're back to Davis Warren, and I just think there's just been too much chaos for them to get a solid game plan, a consistent game plan.
Will Johnson hasn't played in, a month? The star cornerback for Michigan.
Yeah, he was injured, turf toe, first quarter at Illinois, so really five games, and he missed Minnesota game. So, yeah, he's largely been absent this season. And
there's no reason to think he'll come back this week?
I don't think so. I talked to his dad a week ago Sunday, and he told me then that Will was still having trouble pushing off, and I said, well, I guess it doesn't look good for the next 2 games, and he sort of shrugged, and right. I covered him, early '92, so he knows what it's like to play with those kinds of injuries. But, I mean, maybe, but I don't know, Bill. I think it'd be really hard if you haven't been in a game for basically the last 5 games, last 6 weeks, to suddenly come in cold in a way and go play at Ohio State. I think that's a tough ask, but maybe he will. I don't foresee that.
He's the one people remember, who made the key interception early in the game, set the tone for last year's game, stepping in front of Marvin Harrison Jr. on Kyle McCord's pass to set up Michigan's first touchdown. A high first-round pick. I mean, that's kind of the funny thing about this game is that the very top players who are going to be drafted are the Michigan guys. It's going to be Will Johnson and Mason Graham and maybe Loveland and maybe Kenneth Grant. Those are the kind of the big four, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State is probably as the next, 15, right? So it's a matter of depth. Because I don't even know if Michigan has anybody else that's draftable. I mean, you would know better than I would, but there's nobody that stands out to me.
I mean, I don't know, how Donovan Edwards would be looked at,
Right. And Mullings too.
Mullings too. Their kicker's very good, but I mean, he does have another year, so I don't know what his plans are. I would suspect he stays, but I mean, to your point, there is more high draft talent at Michigan right now, but isn't depth what got them where they were the last couple
Well,
years?
you need 22 players, right? You need 11 on the side, and that's it's great to have one or two studs, but you better have your weak link better be decent.
Absolutely. I mean, I go back to '97. That season, they did have Charles Woodson, who was above and beyond, but they had really good pieces across the board, and a really good young offensive line that became a couple NFL prospects there. So they don't have a Woodson though this year. Yeah. I mean, I guess it could have been Will, but he had those 2 pick sixes early, and but he's just been absent. And they've been trying. They've really tried to put it together in the secondary, and they've made some strides. But he's they definitely miss him.
Yeah. How is Michigan approaching this game? I mean, they don't have any pressure. There's nothing on the line for them really, except wanting to extend the winning streak and keep Ohio State miserable. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it. And I thought Monday was really interesting, and I talked to Dave Aveloff, the Jerry Emig of Michigan, and I just said, I don't notice anybody from Columbus here. No TV, no reporters on Monday, and maybe there's one. And he said, this is the most chill Monday in Ann Arbor before Michigan-Ohio State game. And I'm not sure what that's evidence of, but I think the description of chill is sort of how the Michigan players were. They're like, yes, they want to be at Ohio State. Yes, they know what their record is. They're 6-5, and they know what Ohio State is this year. But they're definitely embracing that they just want to have fun, and they have nothing to lose. And that can be a dangerous team too. But I don't know that they have enough to use that to their advantage on Saturday. But they're definitely feeling kind of like free and easy, but definitely focused. I was walking into the building last night, and they were still on the field, and you could hear them. They were blaring the Ohio State fight song, and I mean blaring it.
Right.
So they're definitely focused, but I think that maybe that's the right approach. Just go have fun, and see where the chips fall.
What kind of chance do you think Michigan has? What plausible scenario is there? I mean, I think the most likely would be that Grant and Graham stuff the run game, and the cold weather makes it hard for Ohio State to throw, and then the pressure gets to Ohio State if it's a close game, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. If somehow Michigan can build an early lead, which has not been their forte this year.
Nor has it been Ohio State's for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. But Ohio State's so good in the red zone, both offense and defense. I think it's really hard for Michigan to score. But I think that the prediction I gave you. I mean, I think Ohio State wins by like 30. I mean, I think it could be that kind of game. But if for Michigan to win, I think it's definitely what everyone thought coming into this season. The defense would keep them into games. And they do have some real talent. And talking to Josiah Stewart last night, I mean, he is impactful. I mean, he had a couple sacks last week, and I think he's a guy. And I look at the stats on Ohio State's quarterback, on Will Howard, and he is not easily rattled. I mean, it looks like he gets pressure, and every quarterback's stats decline a little bit when they're facing pressure, but he seems to really hang in there a little bit better than most. And But I do think that if Josiah Stewart can get to him, that was what he was saying. Like, you get it in their heads at that point. You know that you can see the quarterbacks are now thinking a little bit more. And I think that's to me the biggest thing is if they can get into his head a little bit, and stop the run.
He lines up usually on the right side, Josiah Stewart?
Yes.
So he'll go against Donovan Jackson. Obviously converted guard, now playing tackle because of injuries. Now he's an athletic guard, so he can play. He played tackle in high school, so it's not a foreign position. He just hasn't done it in college. But he, more or less held his own against Abdul Carter. Carter did get 2 sacks, but otherwise it wasn't like, a horror show. He did okay. And he's played well generally. If they neutralize him, they really don't have much of a pass rush, right?
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, they have a couple guys who stepped in there, but Josiah's their key. And I was thinking, conversely, Michigan's offensive line just isn't that good. And I just don't know how they're going to go up against Ohio State's defense. I was talking to a coach the other day, not current coach at Michigan, but his assessment is, maybe Ohio State's defensive line there's not as much movement. Maybe Michigan offensive linemen can put bodies on them and slow them that way. But I don't know. I just think it's I don't want to say it's insurmountable. Every game is winnable, of course, as they say, but I just don't know that Michigan has put enough out there that makes you think that they can pull this off.
Yeah, you look at the X's and O's and you just say, they got some studs. But like Graham and Grant are not great pass rushers, right? That's not really their forte. And so
they've done okay. I mean, they each have a couple, and Kenneth has even a block kick this year, and
okay.
He's got he's had 2 fumble recoveries. I think everybody remembers the strip sack against USC, and he picked it up and started running, and then the running back forced the fumble there.
Yeah,
so
right.
A couple weeks ago, he just landed on it. But yeah, no, I think that they're as good as advertised, Bill. I really do. And I guess the other thing is if you can get the magic, the Donovan Edwards magic again, not necessarily him, but get those kind of home run plays that come out of nowhere. And it was interesting talking to Donovan Tuesday night is he's just sort of done talking about the 2022 game, and I think is tired of everyone defining his career by those 2 touchdowns. And I'm kind of like, well, it is the biggest thing.
Right.
I mean, it's pretty substantial.
85 and 75-yard touchdowns.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But, he's a very introspective guy, and I think he wants people to look at his body of work, and I think that means how he's matured over these years, too.
Let's kind of take well, let me ask you about the whole Connor Stallions thing and where does that stand right now? I mean, they were just waiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, and they did receive the notice of allegations a few days earlier than I think people think that they received it. And the 90 days, Michigan has 90 days to respond. That was last week. And they did request an extension. There was the NCAA also there's an amended NOAA, which it could mean anything. It's as simple as clarifying something. Now, I think my hunch is that they were adding perhaps charges to Connor Stallions in terms of the Central Michigan situation. But Michigan does have the extension. What I don't know, Bill, is I don't think it starts another 90-day clock. Okay. I mean, I think that there's, it's just not going to be a mistake. But I didn't see this reaching any sort of conclusion until early next year anyway. So, and I know people throw out vacated wins. I've talked to enough people who've said vacated wins are usually when an ineligible player has been used. And that wasn't the case. And, I don't know what the penalties will be. I think you look at the first investigation, Harbaugh has a bazillion years show cause. I think they had another bazillion years. It doesn't matter. He's not coming back. Right. The one that's me curious is Sherrell Moore. I mean, there are the deleted texts that he has described as, benign. And look, everybody's filed for them. It's not, but this FOIA office at Michigan is not releasing those things yet. But it'll be interesting to see, because he did serve the 1-game suspension last year as part of a negotiated resolution for the first investigation. This could be seen as a repeat offender thing. So does he get suspended next year? Those are probably on the table. So there will be a lot to unpack, but I just don't think we see it until early next year.
Okay. And you mentioned Central Michigan. That's, of course, when Connor Stallions was spotted on the Michigan State or on the Central Michigan sideline for a game, wearing in very bad disguise.
I mean, they proved that. That is the first time they have proof of him at a game on the sideline, and that's a violation of 10:whatever.
Yeah, right.
I've written it 2
you
times.
You cannot advance scout in person.
I mean, I would suspect that, maybe he gets a lifetime ban from college football. Again, this is speculative, but, I can see that kind of thing happening. But, yeah, those pictures are still, they just make me laugh.
Yeah.
When I see them.
Now, Ohio State fans, their dream is for Michigan to somehow lose their national championship. What are the chances of that happening?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the president of the NCAA came out at the end of last season and said they want it fair and square, and I think people are hanging on that. I don't think you say that if you don't believe it. So, I know that's what people want, but I just don't think that that's the direction. So I suspect it'll be an enormous fine and more probation. They're already on 3 years of probation.
Just like Animal House double secret probation at this point.
Exactly. Just that everybody knows. And there'll be some kind of recruiting ding. They had to they missed 3 home recruiting visits last season as part of this deal with the NCAA. So when Harbaugh had to agree to sitting the first 3 games. So it's all very confusing, and the NCAA is just, they're not going to, you try to get some kind of response from them. And
forget it.
They're not going
you might as
to.
well talk to a wall.
Exactly.
There has been some good news for Michigan, though. Recently, Bryce Underwood, the 5-star #1 quarterback, flipped from LSU, and there's a Connor Stallions connection.
Yes, and Connor was with him. Yeah, he was at Belleville. I mean, I think everybody knows that Connor reappeared at Mumford High School as the defensive coordinator.
That's famous for being the Eddie Murphy thing and Hollywood Beverly Hills Cop, right?
And yes, and they're not famous for having a very good football team.
Okay.
So then after their season was over, Belleville's in the playoff, and Bryce Underwood's the quarterback, and their coach called looking for someone who could come in and help assist as loosely offensive coordinator. And so Connor appeared.
That's beautiful.
And then last week at the game, I mean, Connor was with Bryce a lot. I mean, there were photos of the 2 of them together.
It's like
really
Where's Waldo,
crazy.
right?
No, it's not Where's Waldo, because he's very...
Oh, he's visible, right? You don't have to find him. He's not wearing a hat, the red hat, or whatever Waldo is.
He was at the national championship game.
Yeah, I know that. Okay, let me ask you this. We're kind of veering off topic. We got to go here in a few minutes. But what did you think of the Connor Stallions documentary?
Oh, I did not call it a documentary.
Okay, right. That's probably a good. Yeah, Connor Stallions.
It was a story. I mean, it was like it didn't dive into anything meaty. I thought there were lots of interviews, but did they really shed any light? I think they were going for this is so good. Get the guys from Ohio State with the mask on.
Yeah, that whole thing was weird. Yeah.
Get another guy from Michigan who's friends with him. It just wasn't very revealing. What I thought was interesting was Connor's, how he broke down plays and all that stuff. I mean,
brilliant guy.
He's a smart guy. I mean, so.
Savant-like in football, at least, when it comes to that stuff.
But I just was like, this is it. That's how when I watched it, I'm like, wow, okay.
I thought it was quite revealing at the end when they finally show the NCAA hearing, and all of a sudden he has amnesia. I don't remember. I don't remember.
Well, what's interesting about that, too, is that the NCAA records these things. Usually the other parties don't. And so his lawyer recorded it, and the deal was supposed to be, the NCAA said, well, you're going to have to sign an NDA. And they never sent it to the lawyer or Connor or anybody. So they had this recording, and they gave it to Netflix, which I thought maybe not the best move. Maybe you edit that part out if you're protecting your client.
Yeah, it didn't make him look good. It did not make him look good.
It did not look good. And it made the NCAA look, they kind of fumbled too when his lawyer came back and said, well, whatever. Now I can't remember the question.
Right.
She fumbled too. So I think that probably irritated the NCAA, and that might be part of their amendment, the reason they amended the NOAA too.
But getting back to Bryce Underwood, how big a get is that? Because obviously there's a hole at quarterback. He's a 5-star guy. How big is that? How important is that?
It's important, but I had a lot of conversations with former Michigan players, a couple quarterbacks last weekend before the game, Bill, and they were all kind of like, he's still a freshman.
Right.
And, you haven't, and one of the guys said, it's different throwing a pass against Novi, which is a local high school, and Ohio State. Those were his words.
Yeah.
And I still think they got to go in the portal and get, like, if Miller Moss is available, somebody like that,
right.
Bring him in, let Bryce learn. And, but he is, there's going to be a domino effect in terms of recruiting and guys coming here. But again, I mean, you can make that assumption, but now they know what Bryce is getting, what kind of money he's getting. So where's my money?
Yeah, what's the number? It's a crazy number.
I think what's been reported is 10. I've been told that's underreported, but, it's up there. It's more than you and I make, Bill.
Well, more than I.
It's crazy money, but
it is crazy money.
I think he's really good, and I've talked to other people who've really watched him a lot. He's supremely talented, but like these guys were saying last week, these former players, it's just a different animal when you get to college, and I guess time will tell. But I do think they need to. I mean, I was thinking back to the old Lloyd Carr days when they had, in Ohio State had the same thing. You had like 8 really good quarterbacks on the roster.
Well, they got 5 right now. Ohio State's got 5 right now.
Yeah,
they're not going to keep 5. There's no way they'll keep them all.
No, you can't. You can't anymore. But I remember this. I mean, there were some like Jason Kastner was a really good quarterback out of Minnesota. He just sat on the roster. He was like 5 deep. And I mean, remember Tom Brady where he was deep on that depth
Drew
chart
Henson.
before he came up. But those days are gone. And but I do think they have to build some depth because I don't know that Davis Warren's going to stick around. I don't know that Alex Orji is, Jaden Davis. I think that those guys are probably going to think about moving somewhere else where they know they're going to play.
Yeah. Well, I think our time is running out here. Angelique, it is always a pleasure to have you on this very special edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. The highlight of my year, not just my morning. Same for you.
Yes, and I just can't wait to go get down there. So
get some Skyline and Graders. Graders.
That's really all I'm thinking about right now.
I'm sure it is.
I cannot wait to get some Skyline, and I don't care that people don't like it, and there's a big debate about it, but I love it, and I'm going to have my ice cream, my Graders, and I'm going to be happy.
Well, good. Good.
It's all about
That's true. It is always about Angelique's happiness.
That's right.
And you have made our listeners very happy.
Oh, I'm sure. They're like, why do you keep doing this, Bill?
Well, thank you.
It's gotta be somebody else.
Well, thank you so much again.
Don't agree with me.
No, there's nobody else. You're the Queen of Ann Arbor. I've already said it. It's well established. Well established. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you on Saturday. Thanks again for doing the podcast. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm so sorry. Because I'm sure that Ohio State fans are clamoring to read all about the heartwarming story of the rags to riches, purely ethical Michigan National Championship. What's the name of the book, Angelique?
It's a very unique name, Michigan versus Everybody.
Yeah, well, that's probably true in this case. Right? How's it doing? Is it doing well?
I think so. I don't know. I haven't paid attention.
You haven't paid attention? Well...
But I just brought it up as a joke.
Okay. No, but if you are... I'm sure there are Michigan fans that are watching. Please get the book. All right. Thank you, Angelique. Time's about to run out on me.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.